it's true. It is
Yeah.
like a map of Sweden.
Yeah.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, it works.
With the new one with Conny speaking?
No.
Yeah.
Jag heter Albin Hillervik och jag är curator för den här utställningen Spår, begär tillsammans med Benny Nemer som är en konstnär från Kanada baserad i Paris och Conny Karlsson Lundgren som är konstnär baserad i Hobymosse och Stockholm. Den här utställningen presenterar 2 skilda konstnärskap med ett gemensamt intresse för att skapa möten med queer kultur och historia, ofta genom ett slags dialogbaserat arbete tillsammans med andra personer och arkivmaterial. Något som förekommer väldigt mycket i den här utställningen är brev och korrespondenser. Att dialogen är väldigt närvarande, både som en slags konstnärlig metod men också som ett material i utställningen. Utställningen består av 8 verk och det är allt från installationer och performances till fotografi, ljud, video. Och man kan tänka sig att det vi tar del av här är som ett pågående samtal mellan 2 konstnärer som också har ett starkt konstnärligt utbyte och att vi som publik bjuds in att ta del av detta. In the space we're sitting now, there's 2 artworks, one by Benny and one by Conny, that in different ways stems from collections. In Conny's work, a photograph in an art collection in rural northern Sweden sort of forms a starting point for a work dwelling on teenage longing and memory. And in Benny's case, there's a sound work accompanied by a collection of postcards on the wall that invites the audience to follow Benny on a walk where he reflects on his own feelings, but also referring to 2 letters that has been sent to him. So maybe we can sort of in a broader sense talk about what is it in the archive or the collection that interests you as a starting point, especially in relation to a queer artistic practice.
I mean, it's really amazing because I don't think I ever saw the link between the teenage runner, Conny's work in this room, and my piece until they were sharing space and until even what you just said, because even though I don't exhibit the original photograph, it is a photograph of a collection that initiates the process, the research process that ends up being this artwork, Quelques corps favorables. And so the parallels between Conny and my work, Conny and my processes, the kind of impulses that generate an artistic process are always very beautifully aligned, or they sort of resonate with each other. They aren't the same. I think we're often drawn to different things and we work with archival material in different ways and it yields different results, but there's this sort of beautiful commonality in terms of some of those initial impulses, the kinds of relationships we have that lead to finding things.
I think also what connects these 2 works are, for example, in the Teenage Runner that we're sitting here in front, or the stage set for the Teenage Runner, is that I was really interested in the intergenerational aspects of an image, for example, like the queer desire that can passes through different bodies over time. That, for example, the point of departure for the piece is this photograph by Arthur Tress picturing 2 teenage runners Band-Aid fantasy, and that had an immense effect on me when I was a teenager myself, and also it has a big effect on the collector when he was a teenager. So we sort of share the same desire connected to one image that also the whole work builds upon. So that is also something that that I could see in your work, for example, very much. The collector just approached me when I was doing a lecture in this small city in north of Sweden, and just presented that he had a beautiful art collection in his home, and that I didn't know that, and that sort of really triggered my impulses to really to go into these stories, these narratives, and create this performance.
And you have a similar story also with our trip to France, where it's almost a sort of accident. You were looking for something else, but then you found this archive material with the diaries or travel journals.
Yeah,
that became this video work.
It's a travel journal written by 4 young Swedish men, queers, part of the Gothenburg-based group called Red Faggots, or Röda Bögar in Swedish, that traveled to south of France in the summer 1977 for a camp, a liberation camp. And they met with other gay groups, queer groups from Europe, and spent 2 weeks together in the French summer heat. And part of the journals is that they are so overwhelmed with what was happening during this camp. So they didn't really know how to navigate that or how to do it. I mean, basically the first sentence is something like, we just met a bunch of flaming creatures, you know, that is like really overwhelming. And they come, you know, from this sort of smaller towns in Sweden. And this is also something that I can relate to myself, also being a small town queer. But then during the journals, things unfold, and they really getting into the life in this camp, where they're also trying out different kind of utopian ideas. I mean, they're creating a space for themselves and try to live as freely as possible, sharing, you know, lovers, and also sharing political ideas, and also use sort of drag and for more feminine coded clothing as a weapon, as a tool against a patriarchal system. So everything is both very 70s, but it's also very now.
I had this interest in Saint Sebastian and a sort of desire to create a series of vases that take art historical depictions of Saint Sebastian and represent his wounds with holes for flowers. I had this general idea, but I was really struggling with my interest in Saint Sebastian as a figure who I felt was already very vastly documented, amply historicized. He's such an iconography, and I'm like, do I really care about that? Like, what do I care about in this artistic project? And it sort of slowly shifted to thinking about the artists who were inspired to paint Saint Sebastian, but then it moved even more to, let's say, the margin, to those anonymous gay men who were just visiting the museums throughout history and having some kind of affective experience of desire, identification, longing, suffering. These people whose names we don't know, who are not entered into the public record. In this case, the participatory element of this piece, in which mostly you, are going to be inviting different members of the sort of Skåne queer society to come and pay homage to Saint Sebastian through arranging flowers in the vases designed to sort of suggest Sebastian's body. These people get to leave a trace, you know.
It comes from outside, or it leaves outside? Yeah, it comes from downstairs, so it's running through the museum. What's the original thought?
You know, queer culture provides many different opportunities for different forms of kinship to happen, through sexual cultures, through activist activities. AIDS and HIV has created certain kinds of kinship. And I guess on one hand, I'm interested in tracing some of those kinship networks that exist, but then also as an artist, imagining other ways that kinship can be generated.
I really love how the stamp is on the sort of wrong side.
Yeah, it happens a few times. See here, there's the stamps that are on these old ones, and I guess that was the original way to do it, or one possible way of doing it.